The internet and mobile devices like our smartphones and tablets, they've become such an integral part of our lives and improving our lives in many areas as well. But they also intrude in many ways that we may not always be aware of or even want to. So how do you take advantage of all the new technologies that are out there and still protect your online privacy? I'm Timothy Go, and the recent targeted hacking of the digital storage space of some celebrities has resulted in new concerns over data privacy and the security of cloud technology. Practically everyone who uses the internet or a smart device has some of their data stored in the cloud. Well, here's a quick explanation of what that really means and the risks involved. There are approximately 625 million people using the cloud, and that opens up 625 million people to possible breaches of privacy if they are not careful. The cloud is simple. It isn't really the cloud we see above us, but the service companies provide so that we can have access to our files wherever we are. And chances are, you just used the cloud and didn't even think about it. Because every time we post a picture on Instagram, a thought on Twitter, or send a message to someone, we are using the cloud. Pictures and words we post are stored, managed, and protected in servers with encryption technology and policies that guard against data being stolen or replicated without permission. But just like everything else in life, nothing is 100%. Cloud service providers can only do so much protecting data we entrust them to store for us. But we too must do our part.
Users need to also have security strategies and policies to make sure that their data is well protected. Users have to take responsibility in protecting their data as much as software could protect the data for you.
And that means using stronger passwords, knowing what app you allow access to your data, and most importantly, don't store anything that you wouldn't want anyone else to see, because the cloud is here to stay and there is no turning back. So we'll be exploring all those issues in depth tonight, and with us in the studio, Rob Parker, head of Managed Identity Security Solutions Asia Pacific at Verizon Enterprise Solutions, and May Ann Lim is the executive director of Asia Cloud Computing Association. Joining us in Wisconsin in the United States, Professor Elizabeth Buchanan. She's the endowed chair and director at the Center for Applied Ethics at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. All right, let's begin. So, cloud computing. We are not supposed to be thinking about this. It's something we use, as I reported there, and really not think about it. But is that really the case? Rob, why don't you start?
I think absolutely we shouldn't be thinking about it. But more, I guess, taking it back a little bit, we should also not be considering about where the boundary is for cloud. If I put information on my device, I need to consider the fact that that is an internet connected device. Whether that data is stored on my phone or it's stored on my tablet or whether it's stored in the cloud, that's my personal information. And once it's on that device, it's connected to the internet. The internet is an unsafe place.
So in the beginning, we're like, hey, I have my information on my phone, which I can also access on my tablet, which I can now access on my TV if I want to. This is all cool, but we're putting ourselves at risk, are we, man?
Well, ever since the internet first began, if you ever had a Hotmail account, if you've ever had a Yahoo account, right from the beginning, you know, let's not talk about photos, let's not talk about video, but let's just talk about your email. That has always been available for hackers to hack into. So as long as you have anything that's connected to the internet, you know, you're basically vulnerable. And we should be talking about security. It's really not about whether or not the cloud is good or not.
So, you know, I would assume when the cloud was designed back in the early days, it was all for good. It was all for our convenience. We can access anything we want. But was it designed with criminal elements in mind?
Oh, absolutely not, obviously. I think cloud was an expansion of the need for having my information available on multiple devices and being able to leverage the economies of scale of having my information stored centrally.
It's a tool. It's a tool for use. You can use it for good. You can use it for bad uses. You know, as long as you have intentions behind it. So maybe it's time to actually ask Elizabeth her take on this.
All right, Elizabeth, do you agree with what we've talked about here so far? The intention of having cloud computing is actually a good one, but then there are criminal elements out there who will look for holes to exploit what we put up in the cloud.
Sure. Yeah, these are all great comments. We're in an age of ubiquitous computing, pervasive computing. We can't escape it. If we want these conveniences, we do give up some liberties, if you will. Security has become the thing to talk about. We need to be educating our users. If we think about it, security is not something that we talk about with our kids when they're playing Minecraft. That we're not talking about security when kids are getting their Gmail accounts at school. So we really need to change the discourse. We are not going to go back from a cloud environment. We will only continue to go forward, and that's a good thing. We want to be technologically advancing, but we do want to be mindful of the risks, the challenges, the ethical conflicts that come with all of these great technologies. Just as with any technology, they can be used for good purposes and bad purposes.
So Elizabeth, I have a 4-year-old nephew who would always remind his mother, do not put any of my pictures or videos online whenever he sees his mother taking a video of him riding a bike, for example. So I guess he must be right. Whatever you put out there is going to be out there. It's going to haunt him when he's a teenager, perhaps.
Certainly. I think we'll start to see some interesting generational shifts in how we think about our information, how we think about ourselves in relation to data, and this is a good thing. We also are going to see some very significant cultural differences in how we think about our data, our privacy, our autonomy in relation to technologies.
Okay, so when we put something up, an email message, for example, as you were mentioning, May, or a picture or a video up there, we delete it once we're done with it. As far as we are concerned, it's gone. But is it really gone?
That's a difficult question to answer. The short version is no, it's not. If you, for example, are backing up your phone to the cloud, you may delete that information, but it's still in your backup. I guess that sort of segues to my point that I guess we as users need to still focus on security, and I think it's pretty common knowledge now that the username and password is completely obsolete. We need to look at multi-factor authentication as the new standard, so that if that information isn't deleted for whatever reason, whether we have backups of our devices, at least we're trying to raise the bar.
Okay, but this multi password system that you're talking about, so we put our username, our password, maybe our thumbprint, they send us a code where we have to put in before we can log in. It becomes very inconvenient, which defeats the whole purpose of having the convenience of cloud.
That's true. It depends on the implementation. If there's a requirement for you to prove who you are to get access to your data, I certainly would like to get a text message to my phone just to prove that I'm actually sitting there trying to access my information.
But in the whole scheme of things, how can we protect ourselves then? Because if we mistakenly put a picture, or now these days you take a picture, it can automatically back up if you choose it to do so, and then you realize, wait, I'm not supposed to have this picture at all. I'm going to delete it from my phone. I'm going to delete it from my backup. But somehow, somewhere, someone out there can still have access to it.
Well, I won't say someone somewhere out there can still access your data, but definitely you can. The data will be out there. I think there is a balance between convenience and security that needs to be struck, and that's actually up to the user to decide where that balance is supposed to be struck. It's the responsibility for businesses and enterprises to have the options for security to be enabled or disabled, and I think that's a continuing dialogue that we should. It's great that we're having this discussion right now. It's a continuing dialogue that we need to continually adjust our expectations. Elizabeth mentioned just now that we're going to see some generational shifts on how people use technology and what people's expectations of privacy are. previously you didn't have the idea of the selfie. Previously
Right,
you didn't
yeah.
have the idea of sharing your photos on Facebook. Previously you never had the threat of having your baby pictures from day 1 to day X documented by your loving mother.
Some of them naked baby pictures, which are
Exactly.
fine back then,
Exactly.
but might not be fine when you're 30.
Exactly.
All right, Elizabeth, where do companies like Google or Facebook lie in all this? When we put our things up there and then we delete it and they still have the data, can they be compelled to delete it after a certain number of years?
I think that's a really good question. And there are different jurisdictional issues with that question. So, for example, in the EU, we're seeing the right to be forgotten. That's a legislation now where Google can be compelled to remove information from cloud and from its servers. We're not seeing that same movement, the right to be forgotten, in the US, for example. So I think we'll see companies respond to the degree that, one, they are forced to by regulation, two, the customer or subject pushback. So, for example, in the recent Facebook study and the contagion study where it showed data manipulation was going on without users' consent or awareness. So I think depending on the backlash of users, we'll see some changes there. But really, the majority of users still want these conveniences. And I think it was Rob who said, we don't want to think about these things when we're doing them. That's part of our experience. Part of the experience is that it's natural, and we're not looking at the algorithms. We don't even know how the algorithms are working. And so we don't want to change the experience to such a degree that it doesn't feel natural and a good experience. However, I think companies like Facebook and Google will continue to respond to the shifts in cultural attitudes, again to generational shifts and to cultural shifts. Again, with the EU as a great example of the right to be forgotten.
Elizabeth, will there be a risk of over-legislating the internet space, and then it will probably stifle the innovation in that space?
I think that's a great concern, definitely. We want to really avoid over-regulation. I think the internet, to some degree, is truly an unregulated space. It's so temporal and changing. Someone has said you never step into the same internet twice, and I think that's a really important point. And so I think that we will continue to see adaptations. We will continue to see some attempts at regulation, but in some ways, technology is moving so quickly and so unabashedly that regulation is very difficult to apply. Just think about the speed with which regulations take place in relation to or in comparison to technology, and I think there you see a pretty significant difference.
So pretty much by the time they pass some sort of legislation, technology has moved on 10 years after.
Absolutely.
All right, Elizabeth, thank you very much for joining us. Professor Elizabeth Buchanan there from the Center for Applied Ethics at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. And we will have a continuing discussion here with Rob and Mayanne after the break on the future of the cloud and how you can benefit from it without getting into trouble. We'll be right back. Well, in recent years, the cloud has become one of the biggest and most lucrative branches of the technology industry. It is estimated that companies spend about $50 billion on cloud services in 2013, and that figure could more than double by 2017. So, what are the future trends? With me in the studio, Rob Parker, Head of Managed Identity Security Solutions, Asia Pacific at Verizon Enterprise Solution, and Mayanne Lim is the Executive Director of Asia Cloud Computing Association. So there is no turning back now with the cloud. As we mentioned there, it is still a growing industry. What do we do to protect our privacy? Because as we were talking about earlier, we do things without thinking about it. We're not supposed to. But now we should.
Arthur C. Clarke had a very great quote that says that any technology, once sufficiently advanced, looks a little bit like magic. And the cloud is actually something like that. You know, you don't think about it, it's supposed to work seamlessly because that's what good technology does. It's just that right now we've got a couple of breaches here, and that really signifies to me one thing: the need for more media literacy. Actually, the need for more IT literacy. You need to know what it means by when you've synced your photographs to a cloud storage device. Do you need to back it up, in fact?
But even if we know that whatever we put up there is going to be up there for the rest of our lives, we have no choice if we are going to activate our Facebook or Twitter, or, you know, you have to click yes, yes, yes. Otherwise, you're totally out of the loop. So is there anything on the security point of view that can be done for people who violate the code of ethics in the cloud? For example, if you hack into something, post it on a website, can something be done to prosecute these people?
Well, yes, absolutely. In terms of prosecution, I mean, that's hacking. That's not specific to cloud. You're essentially compromising an individual's identity, whether that's on an enterprise server or whether that's in the cloud. The effect is essentially the same. I liked your point earlier that, you know, any technology that's sufficiently advanced seems like magic, and I think that's where we aspire to be with security. We need to acknowledge that you know, it's an arms race for security. The hackers are innovating, and so are the good guys, and we need to stay ahead of the hackers in order to provide that opaqueness for users, that security is happening for them.
Okay, let's talk about the good points of cloud computing now for businesses and for government agencies, for example. This is a very convenient tool to have, Mayan.
It is. It's a fantastically convenient tool. I mean, previously, I remember when I was working, we were holding conferences, we had to lug the conference computer down in order to make sure that we've had our registration because it was on a single machine. But right now with cloud computing, you basically can access it off your cell phone. So that's really, really convenient just in terms of an enterprise mobility perspective. And that's what has been selling the cloud for, I guess, last couple of years. So that's why $30 billion.
So, you know, cloud is growing because of you guys. Security is needed, so that aspect of it is growing as well. But when data becomes compromised, where do we go? What can be done once it's already out there?
So at an individual level,
you can't take it back anymore.
No, you can't. And that is part of the education process. I liked your point earlier around your nephew. I have sat down with my children from an early age to educate them that once information is on the internet, it is effectively there forever. Even if you delete it, it's on the internet, and whether that's breached or not, that information is shared, and I think that's not going to change anytime soon.
But would cloud service providers or government agencies where we entrust all our data, could they guarantee that all these things will stay secure for as long as we live, or even when we die? I mean,
there's been a very concerted thrust over the last couple of years, in fact, the last 2 years, I think, that data centers be localized, meaning that, for example, if you're a Singaporean, your data stays in the data center in Singapore. But what happens is that then the problems around doing business cross-country becomes a real issue because you can't transfer data from one place to another, and that's a huge other trade agenda issue which is going to get stymied by these issues. Any good security person will tell you that really it's again a balance between convenience and security that you need to understand before you use cloud technology, and you personally have to decide what's the balance. You mentioned just now that I have to click yes before I can actually use the technology, or else I'll be left out of the loop. Well, I have friends who've actually said, yeah, I'm actually not willing to give up my privacy to Facebook, to Instagram. I'm actually not going to be on Instagram.
And then they're out of the loop.
And then they're out of the loop, and then we are back to SMSs, etc. But it is a choice that we make. Now, here's the thing. I mean, security standards can go up and up and up. We can make security more seamless than ever before. Thumbprints, eye retina scans, etc. But isn't that even more intrusive into your life? Doesn't that scare you even more that we're entering a panopticon?
Yeah, because now all Apple and Samsung will have my thumbprint. So that worries me now that you mentioned it, because what are they going to do with it? What can they do with it? Or if their security is breached, what can the third party do with all our information.
So I think you made a very good point there around legislation and your point around data sovereignty and the requirement for data to be protected within a country of origin. So it does prohibit information between countries, and I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that legislation to protect that information and subsequently prosecute people in that country is what drives that in large part. So I think we do need agreements between nations around prosecution cross-border for that information, and that certainly is starting to occur, but I think that is what's driving the data sovereignty requirements.
Okay, so you can prosecute the person who hacked into a data center, for example, but can we do the same for the medium where they put all these things in, like 4chan, for example? What role does something like that play?
So 4chan is essentially a group of people on a message board.
So can we prosecute the message board?
The individuals, perhaps. It depends on the legislation for where those people sit, and that is something that international law enforcement is constantly racing to stay ahead of in order to be able to keep up.
Yeah. There is precedent, however. I mean, the mega upload case where the locker system of sharing files and especially movies were put up on mega upload, and I think that had the MPAA, I think, went after the Cloud Locker storage system, and it pretty much got chased to the point where they literally moved their servers from country to country to country. So addressing the point, exactly, to escape legislation. So it's not that it has not been done, it just is prohibitively expensive, and it then becomes a case of mouse and cat then.
Speaking of mouse and cat, where do we see the future of cloud computing? How much more convenient will it be for users, and how much more careful do we have to be with what we put up there?
It is the future. It's going to be the future for everything that we do in the next 5 years, next 10 years. I think what we're seeing is that all the workloads are moving onto cloud computing. I mean, less and less people are keeping storage on their machines anymore. Everything's going to get synced up. But as we move into an era where mobility is so prized, you always want to go regional, you always want to go global. You're not going to be able to get stuck with one device anymore. Right now, everybody can change laptops. Just go out, buy a laptop, and you can get your data.
Everything.
Pretty much everything.
So security-wise, Rob,
I think the onus and the expectation from users of governments and enterprise will be that the security will be commensurate to the amount of services that are now sitting in the cloud. And I think there is an implicit expectation of security in the cloud as a user.
So if we are, feeling a little bit inconvenienced for having to authenticate so many times when you're logging in from somewhere else, it's for our good.
It's for your own good.
All right. Thank you very much
Thank you
for joining us here. Rob Parker from Verizon Enterprise Solution. Mei-Ann Lim is with Asia Cloud Computing Association and TRPC, joining me here on Between the Lines tonight. That's all for the show, but tomorrow on Between the Lines, President Benigno Aquino of the Philippines under pressure to sign a people's initiative to abolish the tainted system of discretionary funding. Pork barrel politics in the Philippines. That's tomorrow on Between the Lines. And a reminder, the show is available online at channelnewsasia.com/video. Have a good night.